Welcome, everybody. My name is Natasha Kathari, and I'm an Assistant Director of Admissions at Clark University. I'm going to be your host for today's session, during which we're going to be talking about clubs and organizations at Clark University. This event is part of an entire series of webinars exclusively for our admitted students and their families. So if you're watching this, congratulations again. We're so excited for you. And I am joined tonight by three wonderful panelists. Mike Hardy, our Associate Director of Campus Life for Student Leadership and Programming. Khadija Kawanda, a junior studying political science on the International Relations track with a minor in philosophy, ethics, and public policy. And Cici Bakhana, a first year intending to double major in combined languages and psychology. So that you have an idea of their roles at Clark and the type of questions that they might be able to answer for you, I would like to have them each tell you a little more about themselves and what they do. Mike, I'll start with you.
Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Mike Hardy. I use he, him, his pronouns. You can tell from the picture that I have my COVID hair today. It's been a little bit of a wild time. But on campus, I work with the student clubs and organizations to help them put on events and programs that they would like to do. I also help to oversee the university center.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. And Khadija, could you go next?
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Khadija. I use she, her pronouns. As Natasha said, I am a junior and I'm also an international student from Hamburg, Germany. Outside of academics, I am currently the social media coordinator of the Black Student Union and will be the vice president next year, which I'm super excited about. I also, just as of today, actually, I'm also the international student rep in student council. And I co-founded an organization called ISRC, which is the International Student Rights Coalition, in which we just try to increase the number of resources for international students, specifically on and off campus. And I'm also a part of Counterpoints, which is the all-female aligned a cappella group on campus.
And finally, Cici.
Hi, I'm Cici. I'm a first year. Like Natasha said, I'm from New York City. I use she, her pronouns. I'm intending, like Natasha said, to major with combined languages, French and Hebrew, and with psychology, so I'm very excited. Outside of academics, I'm part of a lot of different clubs. I do the Clark U Outing Club, which is hiking, all sorts of outdoor events. I'm on a leadership committee with Clark U Hillel, which is our main Jewish organization on campus. I'm part of Shenanigans, which is one of Clark's improv and sketch comedy groups. I'm currently doing a Clark U Player Society production. And those are the things I can think of right now. I have a lot of things going on.
You know, sometimes I hear our students talk about everything that they're involved in and what keeps them busy, and I do wonder if you sleep. You are both incredibly busy, and I love that you're here to talk with our prospective students and their families. And Mike, I'm also so glad that you're here to talk about your role in student leadership and programming. So thank you all. And I'm particularly excited about this session because I fully believe that campus organizations and clubs are the backbone of student life at Clark. So in other words, if you're here to learn about life at Clark, you're in the right place. Our panelists are going to be sharing some information with you about all the different clubs and organizations that call Clark home, as well as the different resources that are available to students who want to get involved. And then after that, we're going to open ourselves up to any questions that you have. In terms of technology, we're going to be using the Q&A feature of Zoom to help keep your questions organized. So if you have any questions for our panelists, please submit them using the Q&A feature, and you can do that at any time. After you submit your question, you might not see it right away. In order to ensure that as many audience members as possible can get their questions answered, we're going to be queuing them up one at a time. We are going to answer some of your questions on air and then some by text. Since there are a lot of you tuning in right now, I do want to apologize in advance if we don't make it to your question, but if we can't make it to it during this webinar, or if you think of other questions, please do feel free to reach out to us at admissions@clarku.edu. And that email address is going to be on the last slide as well, admissions@clarku.edu. All right, let's go. So It's important to know, to get a feel for the scope of student involvement at Clark, that we have over 120 different student organizations that call Clark home, which is particularly remarkable when you consider that we have about 2,300 undergraduates. That's a huge deal. We have a really involved student body here. And our organizations span a lot of different categories, including culture and diversity, publications and media, community service, arts and performance, and more. Even just from hearing Khadijah and CC talk, I think you can get a sense for the broad range of different ways of getting involved there are at Clark. And our student organizations host a ton of different events. Just over the coming weekend, you could play squash, table with the Independent Socialist Group, buy challah to fight hunger, hang out at a bonfire, go hiking at the Wachusett Reservoir, and more. There is always something exciting to do at Clark, and that's thanks in large part to our student organizations. But with so many different and exciting possibilities, where do you start? The Office of Student Leadership and Programming is a great place to start, and that's why I have Mike here to talk a little more about the SLP. Hi, Mike.
Hello.
Again, so I just want to start by learning a little more about the Office of Student Leadership and Programming. What does your office do exactly?
Yeah, so SLP, as we sort of refer to ourselves on campus, is really there to support all the undergrad student clubs and organizations. And it's a variety of things we're doing. So helping people to find space for their events, rehearsals, sort of doing the behind the scenes to make sure that all the performances that students want to do don't all end up on the one weekend. And we also sort of oversee the University Center, which you see a picture of here. This is where our dining hall is. This is also a place where folks can do a lot of events when we're sort of back to full sort of force. But we're really just wanting to make sure that students are able to do the events that they want to put on. And so I love to sort of do the sort of behind the scenes admin sort of support. So our students can sort of do the fun part and be the face of it and make sure they're able to do like what they want to do. And so I'm always the person who's trying to find a yes rather than a no about how we can make that work so that way an event can be successful.
Love that. And it's definitely paying off in terms of the amount of student involvement that you see on campus. So for students who do want to get involved, where do they start and how can they learn about different clubs and organizations?
So everyone who knows me hears me talking about Clark Engage all the time. They probably want me to stop talking about it, but Clark Engage is our sort of a hub for our student organizations. And it's actually engage.clarku.edu. And once you have your sort of Clark credentials, you're able to sort of log in. Beforehand, though, there's actually a way to sort of view all of our organizations through the public sort of side of it. And you're able to sort of go into the organization tab of Clark Engage, see all the organizations that are currently active on our campus, and there's actually a way to sort of filter based off of the types of organizations you're looking for. So if you're looking for an arts and performance groups, you can filter that and see what's available. And so by interest, you can sort of see all of that. I always say to start at Clark Engage because they'll always have a contact person who's another student who is involved with that club that you can then reach out to sort of understand when they're doing, when those meetings are happening or what's happening. The other sort of thing that we do to sort of let people know what's happening is actually a what's happening at Clark email that happens twice a week that gets sent out to all undergrads. This gives a sort of a snapshot of what are the upcoming events for the next few days. That's another way to sort of see what's going on and an easy way to sort of try something out. So in the fall, a lot of times our clubs will do interest meetings that are open to everyone. They'll do events that are open to everyone. And that's an easy way to sort of make that connection to sort of see what you might be interested in doing.
Thank you for that, Mike. And I did put the link to that Clark Engage site in the chat. I believe that's the correct link. Mike, correct me if I'm wrong.
It is. It's the vanity URL is engage.clarku.edu. It's just a little bit easier for me to tell people, but you have the correct link in there right now.
Got it. Okay, well, thank you for clarifying that. And so for students who maybe are on this website and they are looking for a club that they just don't see and they're interested in perhaps founding their own organization, how does that work? And is that something that SLP will help with?
100%. So one of the other sections on the Clark Engage website is an area called forms. And one of the forms that we did this year was a new club application form. So in the past, we used to actually do a lot of like paper applications. And in the age of COVID, I was like, we can do better. And so we did a transition to make this an online sort of process. So if you have an idea, all you need to do is fill out that form. And then once it's received, I'll sort of reach out to the club to see sort of what makes the most sense about creating a club. Maybe is it actually joining another club that already exists? But a really good example is this past year, the bird watching club just got started. So a perfect time to sort of be outside, sort of go and meet with people who have the same interest of sort of bird watching. But that was an example of one of the clubs that was started this year.
Is the bird watching club open to staff?
I think so. I don't think they would turn you away.
That sounds awesome. I might just have to look into that. Mike, thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to turn it over to our students for a little bit so that they can talk more about their involvement at Clark. And for those of you who are tuning in, be sure to get those questions and we are so excited to answer them. So Khadijah and Cece, hello. First, I want to ask both of you, could you just refresh everyone's memory and tell us which organizations you're involved in, how long you've been involved in them, and if you've had any leadership experiences with these organizations?
Khadijah, you want to go first, or? Okay, I'll go first. So again, I'm a first year, but I kind of dived right in. So I'm a part of Clark U Hillel, and on Hillel, I have a leadership position as part of the coordination committee. The way it works is, there are smaller committees, so I'm on one of those. And Hillel, again, is the main Jewish organization on campus connected to Hillel International. I'm also in the cast of a drama that Clark U Players Society is putting on right now. That's very exciting. It'll happen outside with masks, but in person, which is going to be really cool. I'm also part of Shenanigans, just as of this month, actually, or late March, which is one of Clark's sketch, comedy, and improv groups, which is also really fun and exciting. Last semester, I did a virtual musical theater production with Clark Musical Theater, which was Beauty and the Beast. I'm also involved with Clark U Outing Club. So I sign up for their hikes, and I have made friends through there. And then I also participate with Clark U Yoga, which is led by a wonderful junior who's certified in yoga instruction, and she leads yoga at various points throughout the week in various locations. But I go do yoga on Saturdays at 11 a.m. on the green, which is lovely.
Yeah, for me, I am in BSU, which is the Black Student Union, where I am currently the social media coordinator. Within that position, I've also been part of which is really an unofficial coalition between BSU, so the Black Student Union, and CUSC, so the Clark University Student Council. And there we've just been working a lot on more resources that we can provide to specifically our BIPOC students on campus. Then I'm also currently the international student rep for Student Council, which is really new. It just happened today, so I'm still figuring everything out as we go. And then within ISRC, so the International Student Rights Coalition, which was founded last year, we're having our first year anniversary celebration soon, which I'm really excited about. And there, since we're not really officially a club, and I will talk about this a little bit later more, we don't really have like the typical e-board that you would usually see in clubs. So usually would have a president, vice president, a secretary, something that I am right now within the social media coordinator, things like that. ISRC is really just like a place for international students to come together, share ideas, and see like what fun things we can come up with, as well as how can we connect and create new resources. And lastly, I'm part of Counterpoints, which is the all-female aligned a cappella group on campus. We're one of 3 a cappella groups. We're slowly starting to sing again with masks, but obviously social distance and like bigger spaces where it is even possible to kind of like span out. And it's been really fun having that again.
Oh, well, Khadijah and Cece, I feel like between the two of you, you both have quite a lot to celebrate with the International Student Rights Coalition's birthday anniversary coming up, with Cece joining Shenanigans. Like, there's a lot of exciting things happening in your lives, so congrats on that. Cece, I do have some questions for you as a first year. You are very involved. period, and particularly so for a first year. So what was helpful to you as you learned about different organizations?
Yeah, so some of it was from friends who found out about things, and what they would do is they'd tell me the email and I'd get on the email list. Sometimes clubs will table in Red Square, so they'll set up their tables and they'll say like, "Come join us," and you can get their email through there, and so then they can add you to their list, and then you can find out about different events. So you can get more involved, and that's what happened to the outing club. I just got onto the email list through forget how, but I got on the email list, and then that way you can find out if there's a hike coming up, and you can sign up for that. And then as you get to know more people, you become more a part of the club. For other things, sometimes the what's happening emails are really useful, to just find out about various other things I haven't tried. With Hillel, I actively sought it out, but with all the theater, social media is actually really useful, because a lot of clubs, like all the theater clubs and the Shenanigans and Peapod Squad, another one of the improv groups, they have social media, and so I followed them, and then I got notified when they were having auditions or when they were holding events. So that was also really useful. But I think the two main things are email lists and social media for sure. And then when there are events that aren't connected to the clubs I'm already a part of, that's when the what's happening emails are super useful.
Thank you, Cece. And now you're almost done with your first year at Clark, which is a little wild to think about, right?
Yeah, very.
So now you can almost look back and look at who you were when you started at Clark and who you are now. How has getting involved early shaped your first year at Clark, and would you do anything differently?
It's definitely shaped my first year at Clark. I did make some friends in my residence hall, but being part of clubs has, first of all, made my first year more fun because I'm doing other things. I'm not just sitting there doing homework and then like waiting for something to happen. I'm doing things I enjoy, which is a lot of fun. But then also I've gotten to make a lot more friends through the clubs, that I probably wouldn't have met otherwise, because my first year, my residence building is just first years. So I've met upperclassmen. I have a good friend through outing club who I definitely wouldn't have met otherwise. Um, so yeah, it's just, I guess the short way to say it would be a combination of doing things I really enjoy aside from my regular academics, always makes things more fun, and then also making more friends than I would have just found through my residence hall.
I love that it's really enriched your social life at Clark, Stacey. That's wonderful. I feel like building community is so, so, so important during college. So next, I'm going to turn it over to Khadija to talk a little bit about her experiences with student involvement. So I know that you mentioned that you recently, well, a year ago, co-founded the student organization, the International Student Rights Coalition. I know that Mike shared some helpful tips on how to found a club or organization. And from what I understand, your founding of ISRC was a little bit different. Can you talk about how it was different?
Sure. So the way that it originally started, and I feel like this is overall like how organizations would usually form on campus, is that I was really just sitting in the library and I saw one of my international student friends and we just got to talk. And this was also shortly before COVID hit. There were a lot of worries that we had in terms of like, can we go home? Can we not go home? What are some things that we want to see? How can we feel supported? And the more we talk, the more we're like, okay, you know what? There are ways for us to more come together, bring in more international students, and just like look what it is that we can do together. And the more we talked, the more I also discussed it with one of my friends who is also currently the president of student council. And we were really just like exchanging ideas. I knew they have founded their own organization a while back as well. So I was just kind of like looking for tips. And this is really super common at Clark. You really just talk to students and they're super helpful and ready to talk to you, help you out, and see like, how can we get this going together? What are your options? And then as soon as like COVID hit and Clark had to shut down for obvious reasons, this was when my friend reached out to me again and said like, okay, you know what, here's a super fast way for you to get this organization started and just kind of like provide some form of support for international students. And that way was through student council. So we are officially an ad hoc committee through student council. So the way it was just passed within one of their meetings. So it was one thing that was brought up within the student council, see if that's something they're ready to support. And once everyone voted on it, we were just kind of like a subcommittee of student council. So that way, as I was mentioning earlier, we don't have like the typical e-board positions. We don't have a budget, but we're mainly just like a smaller group of people who are trying to kind of like share information, see what we can do. So for instance, we have been working closely with the International Student Center. We set a monthly meeting with them just to kind of like keep each other updated on like the work they've been doing, the work we've been doing, and see how we can assist each other. So currently, for instance, we're trying to establish a physical space for international students in which they can study together, bond together, have resources, etc. And that is something in the works, and we are really much aware that this takes some time. But this is where like connections with faculty has been really helpful. So this is how we got it started. Yeah.
That is wonderful. It sounds like this is an organization that really was founded kind of in this serendipitous sort of way that, you know, you saw the need and boom, here we are. And I do appreciate that you brought up that this process was a little bit different than what clubs and organizations will usually do if someone wants to start one. And so for those of you who are tuning in, if you're looking on that Clark Engage website for different clubs and organizations, you are not going to find the ISRC, since that isn't classified as a student organization in the same way as other organizations are. And then Khadija, you know, you already mentioned today a couple of ways in which you've become even more of an official campus leader, but even going into this session, I've definitely considered you a leader on this campus. What have you learned from these leadership experiences, and how do you think you've grown?
That is a great question. So I think like, especially this past year, my experiences as a student leader has extremely impacted me in ways I couldn't even imagine. As I mentioned earlier, there's an unofficial coalition between the Black Student Union and Student Council. This was mainly because over COVID and when situations and events occurred, especially the killing of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, there was a lot of pain within students. And we just felt this obligation on increasing the resources, sharing knowledge, getting students involved, and just looking for ways to make Clark as much as a home as possible, especially for BIPOC students. Clark is a prominent white institution, so we were really just looking at like, okay, how can we make, although a small portion of students, feel seen and heard and supported and loved, especially in such a difficult time. Not only did we have to deal with COVID and what that meant for us, but also seeing waves of racism going over the country. So this was really a crucial point for us. As an international student, I wasn't able to go home, and still unfortunately haven't been able to go home. But being involved within the Black Student Union and the Student Council really has provided me with a second family in a way. The way that we have grown and learned to trust each other when it comes to organizing has been super fundamental for me. I feel like also in terms of like being a student, I learned really like what are some things that you need to know when you start an initiative. We did a lot of research. What is possible at Clark? What is not possible? Can we involve outside organizations? What are some of the funding that we can use? For instance, like Student Council did a lot in terms of like creating a food pantry for students, kind of like addressing how, especially in COVID, it might be really hard for a lot of students to just go grocery shopping. So we like Student Council provided an option for them to kind of like get food from there. And within the Black Student Union, we provided more of an affinity spaces, connect to alumni, what can we learn from them, etc. So there's a lot of like, we learned a lot of like how to research, how to advocate for yourself, but also how to make meaningful connections and build a network that we can all support each other in. And yeah.
Khadija, thank you for sharing that. I think that this is really meaningful work that's happening at Clark that is very student-led. And I think to me, as someone who works at Clark, it shows what a committed student body we have. So I really appreciate that you've been part of that and that you're sharing that with us tonight. And I do have one more question for Cece and Khadija, which is about those campus events that I mentioned earlier that are often run by student organizations and clubs. Can each of you tell us about maybe an event that's been impactful on you that you've participated in or attended?
Do you want to go first?
No, you go.
Okay. So I am a first year who has spent my whole time at Clark with COVID, so I haven't had that many events to go to, but I think theater productions count as events. So last semester, the Clark U Player Society performed Macbeth, and I didn't get in, but I went to go see it, and they performed it in the Arboretum, which is a piece of land that Clark maintains, and it's lovely. It's got trees, as you would expect, and it's a little kind of a. It's also a place that Clark U Adding Club does some hikes, but they did it in the Arboretum. They had all this interesting lighting and their cool costumes, and they had masks and everything. They did it very safely, and I got to go see it when the sun was sort of about to set, and so it was the perfect time to watch a show like Macbeth. And that was really cool for me because I just got to see, because I'm already a theater kid, I already knew I wanted to do theater, but seeing how not only how awesome CUPS, that's the acronym Clark U Player Society, was, and how talented everyone working on the production was, from actors to tech, but also how they adapted to the pandemic in a really cool way because they were able to still technically do live theater but outside with masks with limited capacity, and it was still really just mind-boggling to watch that show. So that's probably my favorite that I've seen here.
Oh, I love that. I always love going to like any like plays or musical, and also because I remember the little picture you see on the right at the end. I believe that's a picture of the wedding singer. One of the students in Counterpoints is in here, and I absolutely loved it. I every time I see anything play or musical related, I am extremely in awe of how these students can manage to pull off such an amazing production in only like 3 to 4 months while also being a student. And every time, wow, super impressed. One of my favorite ones I would say is Gala. Gala is planned by ISA, which is the International Student Association, and it's a night to really just celebrate the internationality that we have on campus. So this is where students really from like any country and any background can sign up to create a dance to celebrate their culture. And then any student, depending on, and it doesn't matter whether they're also from that country or whether they're US citizens, they can sign up for that dance and just learn it. So this is students really creating and performing a dance, teaching it to other students and working on it tirelessly. And it's held in our Neller, which is the biggest gym that we have on campus. We do have like another facility that's off campus, but this is where really you can't even tell that this is where we usually play basketball. Like the way they perform it, the way the stage is in there, the lighting, it's really, really well done. And it's really beautiful to not only for students to share parts of their culture with the rest of Clark, but also for Clark to really like see and embrace these different cultures through dance. They've also been thinking of kind of expanding it a little bit. I remember the first time that I was at Clark, they invited the Counterpoints, which was really frightening because everyone did such amazing with dancing. And we, at the time, were a very small a cappella group. We were 12 people. It looked tiny on the gigantic stage that they built, but it worked really well because although we were super nervous and we had a few mic issues at the beginning, so we had to start again, it was really nice because Clark is just so supportive. Like everyone at the audience was like, no worries, cheering us on, like being really our supporters, which really made the whole experience just super lovely. So yeah.
I love that. And, speaking of, the supportive Clark community, I think that one thing that I really appreciate as someone who works at Clark is that many of these events are open to people beyond just the student body. So I've gotten a chance to go to some events. I know Mike has gotten a chance to go to some events. So Mike, I'm going to pose the same question to you. Any events that you've really enjoyed or that you've found impactful?
Yeah, I think so. Over this past year, it's been sort of interesting to see how things haven't been as normal as we would like them to be. But over in October, there was some Halloween weekend programming that went on that was really sort of a breath of fresh air in what was sort of happening. And so one of the things that we ended up doing was actually getting an outdoor movie screen, some fire pits. There were some activities going on throughout the day. But the highlight of that for me was actually that we got to showcase a film that Clark students created themselves. It was about a 45, 30-minute film that they actually all created, filmed on campus. They actually finished it over the summer and it got to premiere on campus. And I thought that was such a cool moment to see Clark students create this awesome film, see it outside. It was, I mean, it was a combination of everything. And it's not typically what's always happening on campus, but I think it's the way that our students are able to adjust to everything and still be phenomenal in the midst of everything. That was really a cool moment.
That's amazing. And what a Clarky thing to talk about, seriously. One event that comes to mind for me that I enjoyed attending a couple years ago is also a Halloween related event that was put on by the Caribbean African Student Association. And it was essentially scary stories from the Caribbean African diaspora. And I am not a person who believes in ghosts or the supernatural or really anything like that. And when I tell you, I had trouble sleeping that night, like I mean it. We have some really, really gifted storytellers in our student body, and it was just so cool to see some of the common threads in storytelling between different cultures during that event. So now with that, we are ready to turn this over to your questions. Thank you again to Mike, Khadija, and Cece for sharing about your experiences, about the work that you do. And for those of you who are tuning in, if you have questions, just as a reminder, feel free to post them in the Q&A section if you haven't already. We have about 15 minutes to answer those questions. And we do have our first one, which is, are most clubs open for people of all skill levels to join? For things like squash, theater, martial arts, so kind of a range here.
So I can sort of answer that. So the short answer is that all of our clubs for undergrads are open to all undergrads. That's sort of part of the way to become an official club is that you have to be open to everyone. With that said, we do have some audition processes for certain clubs. So that way, if they so choose to do that. And so for most of them, they are open. For our club sports, they are open. They might have some tryouts and everything. But I know for squash in particular, this semester and last semester, they really have been open to everyone, still all skill levels, because they really just want people to be involved and to learn the skill and all that. But generally speaking, all clubs are open to all undergrads.
I can also add specifically for the theater that I've done, at least with, especially with Shenanigans and Peapod, which I also saw their audition stuff going on. They specifically stress that you don't have to have improv experience. So they do encourage everyone to come and try out. The same thing with Clark Musical Theater. Even though there are auditions for all of those things, you don't have to feel this pressure like you have to have this extensive theater background to try out. So they really welcome everyone.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to that. I am not good at improv at all, but I remember my first year I tried out for Peapod because a friend of mine wanted to go. She was like, "Please come with me," and I was like, "You know what? Why not?" And it was super fun. Like it was really just nice to like get to know different people. We played great icebreaker games, and it was just really a fun experience. So it wasn't like nerve-wracking or anything like that.
And on that note, we actually do have a question about improv groups at Clark and how they're different from each other. Like, do you just pick a random one to join, or how does that work?
I don't know if somebody knows a little bit more specifically what the differences. The ones I know by name are Peapod Squad and Shenanigans. I don't genuinely know specifically what the differences are. Maybe, I don't know, Mike, if you know more about clubs specifically, but I just know Shenanigans and Peapod also do some things together. So really, they're both, I don't know if, I know Shenanigans is sketch comedy, improv, and sometimes stand up. But Mike, if you know more about Peapod.
Yeah, I mean the two organizations have been around for a while, and so they're a little bit more like the additions and everything. And we actually have a third improv group called Amateur Hour that is for people to sort of just learn how to do the improv, how to just to have fun, sort of no sort of huge pressure to perform, and that would be the major difference. But the two, like Shenanigans Peapod, really, it's just the fact that they're two separate groups. They may go a little bit different directions, sort of the comedy or what they're doing. But the three are the only real difference is that amateur hour is open to anyone, whereas the other two you do need a little bit of a audition process.
Yes, I would agree. I mean, and it's the kind of thing where if you don't get into one, you can always try out for the other one. So, you know, it's nice to have multiple, I guess.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. And then we have a question about, well, let's kind of broaden this maybe to different identity-based organizations at Clark University. So I know, Khadija, you were talking about Black Student Union a little bit earlier. Stacey, you were talking about Hillel a little bit earlier for Jewish students. What are some of the different organizations that call Clark home that are devoted to students' different identities?
Yeah, great question. I can talk a little bit more about that. So besides the Black Student Union, we also have CASA, which is the Caribbean African Student Organization. We definitely like often work with CASA together. There are a lot of like common interests that we have, events where we try to support each other in and stuff like that. We also have LASA, which is the Latin American Student Organization. I mentioned ISA, the International Student Association, MSA, which is the Muslim Student Association. So there are a lot of identity-based clubs, but outside of that, we also have a lot of affinity spaces within MFGSS, which is the Multicultural First Generation Student Support Center. And there are faculty who create certain affinity spaces for a number of different identities. Two examples are Focus and CIS. Focus is an affinity space for all men identifying of color. There you go. And CIS is for women of color. And they usually happen twice a week within that building, but I also know they've been looking for some online alternatives right now, especially for students who weren't able to come back to campus yet. So for instance, if you weren't able to join a club, there are different other affinity spaces that you can join at any time. So you don't have to be like, okay, like I missed the first two meetings, now I can't come. Like they're open for everyone at any time.
I'd like to add also that there's PRISM, which is like Clark's big main GSA, which is for LGBT students. So that exists as well. And of course, Hillel, which we already mentioned. And sometimes they do things together. Earlier in the year, we had a series of events discussing the intersections of anti-Semitism and queerphobia or like homophobia and things like that, which was really cool. So we do stuff together.
And the other affinity space that MFGSS does is QTSOC. Also, we love our acronyms here, but QTSOC is Queer Trans People of Color. And so that's another affinity space that is hosted on campus.
We absolutely do love our acronyms at Clark University. Definitely, I think that it can be a fun part of learning about life at Clark is to figure out what all the different acronyms mean, but hopefully we're doing a good job explaining them all. Then we have a question about political and scientific organizations at Clark University. So two kind of separate categories, but do these exist and what are they?
They exist. So we have a Democrat group, a Republican group for our students. We also have J Street, which is a political organization around the formation of the Palestine Israeli state. And then as far as scientific organizations, we have Women in STEM, and then it hasn't been official yet, but it will be in about a week. There will be a future Latinx and STEM organization that's to be created. That's another new group that's on the docket. So I'm meeting with them next week to get that started, but that will be another science-based organization. There's also some science-based by different departments that will have certain groups that are just they come together for that as well.
So really what I should have said is over 120 student organizations and counting, because even now there are so many organizations being founded at Clark, which is always exciting to see. And then I have a question here about funding for clubs. I know that Khadija mentioned that her organization, since it's part of CUSC, doesn't receive its own budget and instead is budgeted through CUSC. So generally though, can clubs get money and how does that work?
Yeah, I could start on that. So the way that it would usually go is that every year student council is given a good budget. It's a big budget, and the way it would work is that clubs would kind of like fill out a form every semester or year, I believe, and then student council would, there's a specific committee who would do budgeting and review it and see whether they're able, seeing also like how we do have over 120 different clubs who all usually need some form of budget every semester. So they would review it and then are trying their best to kind of like match that budget that they're trying to apply for. And this is usually how that would go. Yeah, so you can definitely apply for a budget. It can either, for instance, if you also grow as an organization, you can apply for more. But if you're also like, okay, we're kind of like getting smaller or we're moving online, I don't think we need as much of a budget anymore, then you can also kind of like apply for a smaller one, and that can be reallocated to other resources or clubs and organizations.
Thank you for that, Khadija. Now, we have kind of an interesting question here. I'm trying to figure out what this person is saying, but I guess it's about student involvement at large, or the culture at Clark. So Cece and Khadija, you're two very involved students, clearly, but is this something that maybe a handful of students join clubs and organizations? Is this a common thing?
I feel like it's pretty common. Just seeing my first year, most of my friends are involved in something. Obviously, I don't know everything that everyone I know is involved in, but it does feel like people are always mentioning that they have a thing to go to, or like I feel like every other day I find out that someone I know is involved in something I didn't even know they were involved with. So I would say it does feel like people are pretty involved.
Yeah, and the nice thing about that is we do have a club fair every semester, which is super helpful to just like talk to different clubs and get to know them and see like how you could get involved as either like an e-board member or a general interest member. But honestly, most of the time, and also the way I mostly got involved in these clubs is really just like I was mainly in Counterpoint, so that was the a cappella group, and this is where I really like built most of my connections when I first came here. And then as more as I made these connections, they were just like I just got all of these requests saying like, hey, you know what, you should join the Black Student Union. I was like, I don't know, like it's always a little nerve-wracking. You're like, oh, do I fit in? So it's a lot about really just like trying, like friends encouraging you to join their organization, which is always really nice because you already have a familiar face. Everyone is always extremely excited to welcome new members, because it can be nerve-wracking, especially when you feel like, oh, like, it's already the middle of semester, but everyone is always excited to like hear new people and like get to know new people and hear new voices and ideas. So that's usually just like a side doorway on getting involved into clubs.
Yes, sorry, I do want to add one more thing that kind of jumping off of what Khadija said about people always like being excited to welcome new people. There are also clubs like the Outing Club where you don't have to commit to, and I'm sure there are affinity spaces like that too, where you don't have to commit to coming to every single event or every single hike or meeting or whatever it is. And it's more just, you can get on the email list and you can attend events, and it's much more casual and people are always excited to have you. So it's like Khadija was saying, it's not so scary. It's very low pressure and a lot of fun. So low risk, high reward.
Cece, I love that you brought up the Outing Club. There is a bit of a running joke among the student ambassadors who work in our office about how at some point in time, every Clark student has found themselves on the email list for the Outing Club. It's just one of those organizations that is so welcoming to people at all times and is so enormous and has a pretty broad scope because they do hikes and they do ski trips and they do paddling expeditions and all that kind of stuff that many students find themselves interested in at least one of the different things that they offer. So I think that that's pretty fun. Next, we have a question about business management. Do we have any management clubs at Clark?
We do. So, the School of Management actually sponsors several different management clubs and organizations that are also open for undergraduates to be a part of. We also have a chapter of DECA that is on campus that will also sort of fit in that role.
Awesome, thank you. Mike, I feel like this is turning into a pop quiz for you of what are all the different student organizations that call Clark home.
I think I might be okay to answer it. We just went through spring registration, so I've seen these names a lot everywhere.
I appreciate that. And then we do have a question specifically about the outing club. How often do they host events?
Oh, I love a good outing club question. Recently, as I've been at Clark, it's been about every week. We have a hike usually. So the planning meetings are every Sunday at like 6:45 p.m. and everyone is welcome to come and like help plan hikes. And then immediately that night they send out an email with everything coming up that week. And usually there's about one hike on the weekend, and then sometimes they'll have little bonfires as well, which we have a little fire pit right near where I live, actually. So I would say it's about once a week. I don't know how often it is, when there are ski trips and everything, but definitely right now it's at least once a week.
Thank you.
I was just saying, our outing club is one of the most active clubs we have. Pun not intended, but they do a lot of great things. And when we're sort of back to without travel restrictions and everything, the ski trips and everything they do, those happen about once a month. But they're always doing things on sort of a regular basis with the hikes and everything.
Mike, we love a good pun here, so thank you for that. That was delightful. I actually just came up with a question that I hope you'll all humor me in answering, which is, if you could join an existing Clark organization that you're not already a part of, or if you could found an organization that doesn't exist at Clark, what would it be? And this is for all three of you.
So I can start. So I think one of the coolest clubs that we have at Clark is called Spock. It's science fiction people of Clark, and it is this great group of students who do all these video games, board nights. They do so many game nights and everything. But if you're interested in sort of gaming, just playing board games, that is the place to go. They are really welcoming, opening to everyone. But that I think is one of the more unique clubs that we have on our campus.
I feel like Mike reminded me that Spock exists, so now I'm gonna have to say Spock. When I first went to the Hillel office, the Spock office was right near there, and so I immediately was drawn to it. So it's good to hear that they're welcoming, and hopefully I'll be able to go at some point. But my friend and I actually thought of starting, in terms of what club would you want to start, we thought of starting something or finding something to join relating to not like Francophone arts and culture, because I think there have been some events that the French TAs have hosted in the past, but we were looking to see if there was some kind of organization or club for that. So if we have time, that might be a thing.
Yeah, for me, I know that musical theater this year is doing Rent, which is one of my absolute favorite musicals ever, and I wish I had time to join.
Yeah, they're doing Fun Home now. You didn't hear they changed it? So maybe they'll do Rent in the future.
Oh, wow.
I have the same thing.
Next year, I will have to do it because it's my senior year, will be the only time. But yeah, this is absolutely what I would love to do.
Wonderful. What a range of different ideas you all have. And I think for me, I would probably join Variant Dance Troupe because I really like to dance. And Variant does all different styles of dance, student choreographed, non-audition. So you could do everything from hip hop to Bollywood to contemporary. And I just feel like it would be a really great place to learn from peers. So that would be my choice. I think we have time for maybe one more question, and this one's a little bit more general. Doesn't have to be related to your involvement in student organizations, but certainly can be. What makes Clark feel like home for you? And this question again is for all three of you.
I can start again, I guess. This is a great question because it's kind of why I chose Clark in the first place. The moment I arrived at Clark for my tour back in junior year of high school, it felt like a place that could feel like home. And that's just because of the people, really. Like the students that I met were so friendly and so welcoming. And we were able to just talk about bananagrams, which is a game that they had just played while waiting for their info session and that my dad and I love. And so it didn't even feel like they were, these professional students just here to do their job and go home. Like it really felt like they were friendly and warm. And when I actually came to Clark, I felt the same thing. So it really is for me, just the environment of the people that make it feel like a home, for sure.
Yeah, I would say for me, it's very similar. I was happy enough to be able to tour Clark also before I came here, and it wasn't really on my list at the beginning, but my college counselor kind of just suggested to me. And it was really the college tour where I was like, wow, okay, Clark just moved up, like all the way up, just because it's really the atmosphere that I really love being in. It's just like what Cece was just saying, like students are super friendly and open, like they're excited to meet new people, they're ready to help. And now that I've been here, it's so nice because like the campus is pretty small, but just by walking to class, it's just like, you see at least 5 of your friends who say hi and like stop, and you like have little conversations with them. So it's really just like, I think the student body is extremely supportive, extremely dedicated and committed, which really has helped me, especially seeing how I haven't been home for a while. It's really some of the friends that I've made here that made it possible for me to not go completely insane. So I really do appreciate all the student body here.
Yeah, for sure. The students are one of the best parts of my entire job. I also like to sort of, I have like one of the best offices on campus because I oversee the red square and the green. And so a few weekends ago, I was in the office on a Saturday when I probably shouldn't have been, but I was there. So let's just get over that. But I was out and I was able to see all the students doing yoga on the green. It was this one moment of like, how cool is it to see like how active things are and to see the student body actually be interacting and everything. But by far some of the most dedicated and passionate students I've gotten to work with, and really makes it so much more fun to be and easy to sort of work at.
Thank you all for sharing that. I so appreciate your time today. We have just a couple minutes left, and I'm so grateful to you all for sharing your experiences and your expertise. And to those of you who are tuning in, thank you for taking the time to join us. We are going to continue our celebration of you, all of our admitted students and families, all month long. So we are just getting started. Next week, we have another 3 webinars coming up. So on Monday, April 12th, please join us at 7 p.m. Eastern Time for a webinar on multicultural and first generation student support. Then on Wednesday, April 14th at 4 p.m. Eastern, we are hosting a webinar on Clark's Human Environment Regional Observatory, which is a great example of the partnerships between Clark and the community that we call home. And then finally, on Thursday, April 15th, tune in at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to learn about Clark Athletics. You can find registration for all of those events, as well as more information on our admitted student site, which you can see on that screen, www.clarku.edu/admitted. Lots of resources there as well. And as always, if you have any more questions for us or just want to say hi, feel free to email us at admissions@clarku.edu. Again, thank you all so much for tuning in tonight. We had so much fun answering your questions, hanging out with you all, even virtually. And we do hope that we get to welcome you to our community this fall. Until next time, take care.